After the Marco Polo Bridge incident, Japan began its full-scale invasion of China. At the start of the war, the Japanese army arrogantly boasted that they would destroy China within 3 months. In the entire anti-Japanese war, the Battle of Shanghai was undoubtedly the largest and most brutal battle. In just 3 months, China successively deployed more than 700,000 troops to Shanghai. One division after another was thrown into the battlefield like numbers. Some lost half their men in less than 3 hours. Some lost 2/3 of their men after just 5 hours of support. The entire battlefield was like a meat grinder and a bottomless pit, devouring the lives of Chinese soldiers. After 3 months, the casualties of the Chinese army reached more than 300,000. On average, one division was sacrificed every 3 days. Truly, every inch of land was paid for with blood. Before the Battle of Shanghai, Japan had already started nationwide emergency mobilization. In less than a month, they were able to gather over 100,000 troops for the battlefield. The main reason was their advantageous geographical factors. Northern China is close to the northeast is close to Korea, and Korea is separated by a body of water from the Japanese mainland. Thus, the main base and the battlefield were connected in a straight line. With such a convenient supply source, no matter how fearless and determined the Chinese army was, it was difficult to withstand the Japanese army's steady advance. To reverse this predicament, besides the battlefield in northern China, Chiang Kai-shek opened a second front in Shanghai. The strategic concept behind this battle was that if the space in northern China were lost, it would have a strategic impact on future operations. Because if Japan were allowed to advance from the north to the south, the main force along the Pinghan Railway, and other troops along the Jinpu Railway, then the nationalist army would be forced to the southeastern coast and would be surrounded, leading to China's complete defeat. Therefore, Chiang's strategic goal was to change the main battle line of the Japanese army, turning their advance from north to south into an advance from east to west. The nationalist army could then fight while retreating, with their backs to their bases, using space to gain time for China to build up its military and prepare for war. Thus, the nationalist army took the initiative to open a second front. This battle was the first large-scale strategic battle between China and Japan since the Mukden incident, known as the Battle of Shanghai. Therefore, starting from early August, the military commission began mobilizing troops from all over the country to gather in Shanghai. However, due to the lack of transportation and poor mobilization conditions at that time, the incoming troops used various means of transportation, some by train, some by boat, but most of them marched on foot. As a result, many units arrived at the battlefield only after the battles had already ended. At the start of the battle, the overall commander of the Battle of Shanghai was Feng Yuxiang. Feng belonged to the Northwest Army, and Chiang Kai-shek was concerned that he might not be able to command the various factions. Therefore, General Gu Zhutong, who was in charge of both the northwest and southwest camps, was specially dispatched to Shanghai as the deputy commander of the war zone to coordinate the continuously arriving troops from various regions. The first to arrive were Wang Jingzhou's 87th Division and Sun Yuanliang's 88th Division. These two divisions had fought in Shanghai during the January 28 incident and were familiar with the area. Guangdong troops, Zhang Fakui's 56th and 57th Divisions, were also advancing toward the Pudong area. On August 11, Zhang Zhizhong, the commander of the 9th Group Army, arrived in Nanxiang. In the afternoon, the advance troops of the 262nd Brigade under Peng Gongying of the 88th Division had just arrived at Chenru. Sun Yuanliang quickly took the initiative, leading his troops directly to Zhebei, occupying the North Railway Station. At 9 a.m. on August 13, the Japanese army began their fierce bombardment on the Zhebei National Army positions using their superior naval artillery. At 3 p.m., the 1st Battalion of the 523rd Regiment of the National Army encountered the Japanese at Baji Bridge, officially commencing the ferocious Battle of Shanghai. Baji Bridge was merely a small, inconspicuous bridge over a nameless ditch, less than 20 meters long. However, due to the conflict that erupted between Chinese and Japanese patrols there on the afternoon of August 13, 60 years ago, which sparked the war. This small Baji bridge was etched into history. Zhubei was a densely populated urban area with many tall buildings, so the Battle of Shanghai began with close-quarters combat in the streets. The Japanese placed artillery on major roads, firing parallel shots through the densely populated Zhubei district, causing countless civilian casualties. On August 14, the national government issued a declaration of self-defense war, and the military commission, led by Chairman Chiang, issued the general attack order. The 88th and 87th Divisions fought bravely, reclaiming positions such as Chizi University, Wuzhou Cemetery, Shanghai University, and Baji Bridge, which had been occupied by the Japanese the previous day, and launched attacks on the Japanese-occupied yarn factory. Jiang Tanghua, a soldier of the 88th Division who participated in this wave of attacks, recalled the situation at that time.
8月13打的，8月15我们到的，把上海所有的尸体呀，叫日本人占地方统统拿过来了，就一个大沙场没拿过来。结果说我们这个523团啊，攻进去一个营，中他的电网，一个营整个的死在那个大沙场里头。
In the first phase of the Battle of Shanghai, the Nationalist Army took advantage of the gap before the Japanese reinforcements arrived and their positions were stabilized. Using the 88th and 87th Divisions along with local garrison troops, they engaged in fierce battles with the Japanese along the line from Hongkou to Yangshipu, fighting for every bridge and every building. This was the first time the Japanese encountered the strong offensive capabilities of the Nationalist Army on the Chinese battlefield. At this time, Japan could only retaliate against the Chinese troops flooding into Shanghai with their air force and naval artillery. Starting from August 15, the Japanese began intensive bombing of the urban areas of Shanghai with their superior air force. In one day, the Zhubei district was reduced to a 10-mile inferno. The once bustling Zhubei district had now become a hell on earth filled with smoke and devastation. Just on the short stretch of road between the Cathay Hotel and the Huzhong Hotel on Nanjing Road, over 1,600 civilians were killed or injured by the bombings on this day. The Shanghai South Station of the Shanghai-Hangzhou Ningbo Railway was completely destroyed by bombings. Over 200 passengers waiting at the station were killed instantly. A child who lost his family sat helplessly in the ruins, crying loudly, completely unaware of what had happened to the world. The cruelty of the war was eternally captured in the lens of photographer Wang Xiaoting. This photo was once published in major newspapers around the world, arousing some humanitarian concern among international friends about Japan's invasion of China. Air raids were a nightmare for the suffering Chinese people throughout the war of resistance. At that time in Shanghai, between waves of bombings, thousands upon thousands of residents would rush into the streets, running in all directions. They did not know where was safe, nor did they know which direction to escape to, but they went with the flow, hoping to avoid the fate of death. This time, due to past wartime experiences, people had learned to take refuge in the concession areas. So, they swarmed across the Suzhou River, rushing towards the international settlement. Initially, the foreigners did indeed show humanitarian spirit, sheltering more than 50,000 refugees. However, as the numbers became overwhelming, they had to close the gates, cutting off the path of escape and leaving many disappointed eyes staring through the cold iron bars. On August 19, Song Shilian's 36th Division and Xia Chuzhong's 294th Regiment of the 98th Division arrived in Shanghai from North China. On the same day, Japan's Fujita unit of the 3rd Division from Nagoya also landed in the Yangshipu and Ryuzanku areas. As soon as the 36th Division entered the battlefield, they immediately had direct confrontations with the enemy around Tianbao Road. Direct confrontation means that both sides engaged in head-on clashes. Fang Zhentong, a brother from the 36th Division, described the battle conditions at that time.
我们起房都是夜晚起的啊，夜晚送饭送上来的呀，夜晚送的，白天根本就送不上来的呀。
他凶得很的呀， 他不是这个抗击书记的时候啊，他也吃得好，穿得好，他对人也好，他这个武器比我们好嘛。我们那个这个一个连轻机关枪只有3支轻机关枪，子弹啊，他一发打一发，他一发打一发，机关枪真的打他会卡弹。
Under such harsh conditions, the soldiers of the National Army still launched fierce attacks against the enemy. On August 20th, the 88th Division, 87th Division, and 36th Division jointly attacked Huishan Dock, fighting for a day and night. Coordinating with tanks, the 36th Division broke through the Japanese defense line, advancing all the way to the bank of the Huangpu River. This marked the first use of tanks in Nationalist Army operations, but due to poor infantry coordination, they were later ambushed and trapped in dead ends by the enemy. Starting from August 13th, our army had been on the offensive. At this time, the Japanese demonstrated their astonishing mobilization capability. By the 23rd, reinforcements began arriving, forcing the Nationalist Army to end its intense offensive after 10 days. After 10 days of fierce fighting, beginning from late August, Japan gradually deployed troops to the Songhu battlefield over the course of a month. These included the 3rd Division led by Fujita, the 11th Division led by Yamamuro, the 101st Division led by Ito, the 9th Division and the Takasuji Detachment from the 8th Division led by Yoshizumi, as well as the Ando and Takeuchi detachments from the 1st Division, and the Chongqing Detachment from Taiwan. According to Japanese military history records, these units were mobilized urgently and dispatched to reinforce the area. Clearly, at the outset of the Battle of Shanghai, they had not anticipated the scale of the conflict to be so vast. Now, let's examine the movements of the Japanese forces on the map. In late August, Japanese reinforcements landed along the defense line from Uzanku to Lohadeo. Assuming the Japanese established beachheads in this area, they leveraged the absolute advantage of mechanized units to advance along this front on the open sandy plains, thereby forming a large encirclement around the Shanghai area. Once the Japanese successfully encircled the area, Shanghai would be finished. Commander-in-Chief Chen Qing fully understood his predicament. With limited troops and rudimentary equipment, he had to desperately block the Japanese advance at the beachhead. Thus began the second heroic phase of the Battle of Songhu for the Nationalist Army, focusing on anti-landing operations. At this critical juncture, Zhou Yan's 6th Division, Luo Zhuiying's 18th Army with Peng Shan's 11th Division, Hua Kuei Zhang's 14th Division, and Li Shufan's 67th Division arrived in Shanghai and joined the battlefield. With reinforcements from both sides, the scale of operations expanded, extending the front line of the Songhu battlefield northward from Zhanghuabin, through Wusong, and across Baoshan County, spreading towards Lohadeo. The Japanese forces found the vast and flat suburban areas advantageous, like a tiger with wings, unstoppable. In this time and place, aside from their rudimentary weapons, the nationalist troops could likely only rely on a sense of determination akin to facing death, to hold on to every inch of their homeland. With the cover of naval artillery, Japanese forces quickly established beachhead positions and pushed inland. Consequently, the towns of Yuepu, Luojian, Wusong, and Baoshan became the front lines of fierce battles. On this front line, on August 22, Yuepu and Shizalin fell first. Xia Chuzhong led the 583rd Regiment in a fierce counterattack, finally recapturing lost ground on August 26th. The 98th Division held Yuepu with the 583rd Regiment, and the 2nd Battalion of the 588th Regiment defended Shizalin. This battalion was attacked by the Japanese on August 31st and fought bitterly for a day and night. The 5th and 6th Companies suffered heavy casualties, and the fate of the 4th Company remains unknown. Shizalin was lost again on September 1st. The 583rd Regiment held Yuepu until September 10, facing repeated large-scale enemy attacks, and the main positions were repeatedly difficult to defend, as the Nationalist Army fiercely launched counterattacks. The town of Luojian fell on August 24 but was promptly retaken the same day by Peng Shan's 11th Division. In late August, despite extending the Songhu front, the Japanese did not ease their airstrikes on the urban areas. On August 23, under intense bombing, Shanghai's well-known Sincere department store was devastated, with rubble piled high amidst wailing cries. Many bodies were burned beyond recognition, their mangled remains loaded onto trucks and carted away. Upon arriving in Shanghai on August 22, Zhou Yan's 6th Division was immediately stationed in Wusong town. Zhou Yan endured 10 days amidst the inferno, left with fewer than 200 men, and was forced to withdraw to Jiating for reorganization. The severity of their combat conditions defies description. As for the police reserve units holding the old artillery positions north of Wusong, they held on for 2 more days, finally yielding on September 2 ND. Not a single brother from that company walked away alive. The situation in Baoshan County was even more dire, reflecting on the battlefield at the time, nationalist soldiers in Defew recalled.
包山呐哈，到黑了，他所有的炮啊哈，飞机啊，都炸在那个山了，不但说是你，看那个山完全都是火光啊，好像这个烧房子一样，那个烟雾沉沉的，就也看不到一个人了。
On September 3, the Japanese army began attacking Baoshan city but was repelled by the nationalist forces. On the 5th, the enemy advanced again in 3 directions. By the 7th, Baoshan city fell. Captain Yao Ziqing led the remaining 20-some brothers in a desperate hand-to-hand combat with the enemy until all were sacrificed. In Luodian, Luo Zhuiying repeatedly failed to capture the town. Although the 3rd Battalion of the 79th Regiment of the 14th Division once fought fiercely to enter the city and killed the Japanese brigade commander Qin Er, they could never recapture Luodian town. Recalling the events of those years, Commander Peng Shan said,
那罗店那点小地方，我在那个地方居住仅仅43天，这是很不容易的。43天去啊来去，伤亡很大的，伤亡很大。那伤亡到什么？伤亡到你到我这来只有80公尺，这个地方你不能到我这来，你那里一动的时候，敌人就把你打死。你只要一出来，先一点目标吧，就不能活命。
Under the continuous pressure of enemy reinforcements, General Chen Qing decided to temporarily switch to a defensive posture to reduce casualties. This happened on September 10 and marked the transition into the defensive phase. After 2 stages of offensive and defensive battles since the start of the Battle of Shanghai. By late October 1937, the Battle of Shanghai had entered its 70th day. Looking back on these 2 months of warfare, it can be said to be an unprecedentedly brutal struggle in human history. Former commander of the 3rd War Zone, Feng Yuxiang, wrote in his recollections that our troops threw in one division after another into the battlefield every day. Some lost half of their men in less than 3 hours. Some supported for 5 hours and lost 2/3. The entire battlefield was like a furnace, our troops melted away as soon as they entered. At that time, Deputy Battalion Commander of the Tax Police 5th Regiment, Lao Xingchen, recalled.
我们装备不如他，我们的空军有250架，他是3000多架。在上海的黄浦江上，长江口，他4艘航空母舰，黄浦江从长江有100多条兵舰，他的炮都可以集中在这个长江三角洲。飞机可以在这里打，我们250架飞机对他3000架飞机这么打我们跟着天地之别，我们还是什么呢？买锅造饭，行军锅在那里造饭，烧得满天烟火冲天，报告敌人我在这里啊，你来啊！我们很多的部队啊，没有跟敌人见面就垮了。就是这样炸了，就给他的炮兵，给他的飞机来炸了。我们这个陆军来讲啊， 除了中央军有机关枪，一个师有一个炮兵营，4门3炮而外，没有啊，我们就靠血和肉啊。各省的军队呢，只有步枪啊，2条腿1支枪啊，我们4个师才打他1个师啊。
官兵的英勇啊，牺牲的有余，个个不怕死，这个是以血肉之躯的。头一仗这个旅长就阵亡，除了师长以外就是旅长，一个旅管2团呢，他都到前面去督战，那么都阵亡了。让我们的牺牲。
Chen Cheng's troops, starting from September 11th, defended along the front south of the Yangtze River and west of Panjian for a grueling 40 days. The tragic and heroic stories during this period are difficult to fully recount.
日本人派了这个80辆战车，我们守着清朝80辆战车，他不敢正规的挺进，那我们不动，他把战车从后面进来，要过来翻进来这样子，对付我们，爬到我们这个碉堡上面，我们拿这个手榴弹啊，5个6个手榴弹，没有战车，没有正航炮嘛，对付他的战车，我们怎么对付啊？自爆费用混起了个炸药，他的这个战车来也好，来压我们的当兵，一压连我们的人牺牲一个，他的战车也牺牲一架，就是那么干，没有炮，又没有什么，我们都是陆军，可怜了，我们来自的武器啊。
From September 11th onwards, over the course of these 40 days, the elite Japanese forces on this front line only managed to advance approximately 5 kilometers. Those of our nationalist army brothers who were fortunate enough to survive recall the conditions when they fought wounded during that time.
我们那个班长说：“杨文杰，你挂材料，我一看好多的血哦。以后你赶快下去吧。”我找个连长说：“怎么样？你赶快上营部里去，到营部里去，便宜的是伤兵啊。”就在这个时期，我这个步上前一朝，向后面过下去。日本人走那边，哒哒哒，一梭子这个轻机枪啊，呀，这边这呢，就打到了。当时留下时还不感觉怎么样，等一会儿就不行了，那就走不动了，走不动。
我们去的时候啊，是晚上到了安亭车站，我半夜到嘛，到那个天很黑也看不见，我一下来就闻了一手血腥味，好难闻。结果一看怎么样，那车站上都摆满了都是中山的官兵，预备后送的。
那一天的时候啊，已经运到了几百个伤兵，现在还剩了有几十个人，几十个人已经车都没有了。那个时候我也没有办法的时候，可以讲跟那几个伤兵的时候不能走成的伤兵。不能运走，把他丢到那里，我也只好走了。我说，是才到这个地方的时候，我不能说了。
In the Battle of Shanghai, what was the exact casualty rate of the Nationalist Army? The 88th Division defending Zhubei North was considered relatively successful, as stated by Division Commander Sun Yuanliang.
以师的编制啊，相当有15000人那样子。那么最后到了南京呢，这个剩下不过1/3的，就是88师的话了。
On the Songhu battlefield, the recent situation of the Japanese army was not optimistic. By October, they couldn't even replenish their ammunition and had to borrow from friendly forces in North China. This was unimaginable for the well-trained Japanese troops. On October 20th, the Japanese General Staff Headquarters was forced to deploy 3 divisions from North China to reinforce Shanghai. These divisions were the Nakashima 18th Division of the Ichikawa 10th Army, the Matsumatsu 114th Division, and Yasuo Tani's 6th Division. From a strategic perspective, although the Chinese army paid a considerable price, the Japanese army's operational axis from north to south was finally successfully reversed by the Chinese forces. Sun Yuanliang's troops, responsible for defending the northern part of Shanghai along the Huangpu River since August 13, still held their positions without losing an inch. On October 25, Japanese aircraft launched 150 bombing sorties on Daqiao. Daqiao was a crucial stronghold in the defense of Shanghai, belonging to the Central Operational Command of China. On the 26th, the Japanese claimed that the seemingly impregnable Daqiao had finally fallen. The fall of Daqiao marked a significant turning point in the Songhu battle, as it rendered the defense of the northern Shanghai area less meaningful. With the fall of the key stronghold Daqiao in the defense of Shanghai, the Chinese army, starting from the 26th, began to withdraw along two routes, the Beijing-Shanghai Railway and the Suzhou River, to avoid being surrounded and divided by the Japanese. Apart from leaving a small number of troops to cover, the main forces withdrew. Among them, the 800 brave soldiers of the 524th Regiment of the 88th Division remained behind at the Sihang warehouse in Shanghai, sacrificing themselves to cover the retreat of the main force. The Sihang warehouse, originally a storage site for 4 banks including Jincheng, Salt, Zhongnan, and Continental, became world-renowned due to the staunch defense led by Xie Jinyuan's 800 men. At that time, the sight of the national flag fluttering atop the Sihang warehouse across the Suzhou River was a ray of hope for refugees in the concessions, and the Girl Scouts who risked their lives to deliver the national flag became immortalized in history.
非常残酷，四面都是日本人，一面是英国人。我杨慧明这个10几岁的大姑娘，为什么冒出这个生死关头，我送这面国旗给四行仓？
The story of Yang Huimin risking her life to deliver the national flag to Sihang warehouse stirred Chinese unity against the enemy, with a determination to resist Japan even unto death. This strength may have been a serious miscalculation by Japanese warlords in assessing both sides' military strength. From October 27 to 30th, 800 brave soldiers defended Sihang warehouse for 4 days. The Japanese attacked 6 times but were repelled each time. Later, out of humanitarian concern and concerns for the safety of the concession, the British sheltered these soldiers as they retreated into the concession. Now, let's review the final situation of the Battle of Shanghai. On November 5, the advance units of the Nakajima and Tani divisions landed at Jinshanwai in Hangzhou Bay. On the 13th, the 16th Division landed at Baimaoku and advanced towards Changshu. This pincer movement tightened its grip around Shanghai. The outcome of the Battle of Shanghai was sealed, with the Nationalist Army gradually retreating until completely withdrawing from the battlefield on November 13th. The Battle of Shanghai was the largest-scale battle during the 8 years of resistance against Japan. The Nationalist Army deployed up to 71 regular divisions and local troops totaling about 750,000 personnel, while the Japanese mobilized approximately 9 divisions, totaling over 250,000 personnel. According to Japanese estimates, the combat strength of one of their battalions could surpass that of a Chinese division, excluding the capabilities of their air and naval forces. Under such disparate circumstances, within such limited space, the Chinese forces managed to engage the formidable enemy for a prolonged 3 months, a rarity in the annals of both Chinese and international military history. Official casualty figures for both sides were not formally compiled, but according to General Sun Yuanliang's estimation, Japanese losses numbered around 50,000 personnel, while our own losses were approximately 180,000, including at least 28 commanders. These individuals sacrificed their lives to shatter Japan's 3-month ambition of annihilating China, buying our nation a precious 90 days. More significantly, they reversed Japan's strategy of advancing from north to south, instead compelling them, passively, to maneuver from east to west under Chinese influence. Therefore, despite the loss of Shanghai, the Battle of Shanghai can still be considered the decisive first battle for the survival of the entire nation. At this moment, amidst the dense smoke of Baoshan, the shattered remains of Wusong, and the pockmarked ground of Dachang, These soldiers emerged from the inferno of the battlefield, ready to march into another round of combat.